Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to make this trendy BUBU dress that you see on me. If this is something you're interested in, keep on watching. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. If you're new here, thanks for joining. Please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on your notification bell so you get notified when I post new videos. Alright, let's get started. The materials I'll be using: I have my tape roll, scissors, chalk, pin, and I have a plain fabric that I'm going to combine with the Ankara piece. So I'm going to fold this Ankara piece into 4. Just as you can see, you fold into 2 first and then fold into 2 again. So now I'm going to proceed to mark out my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Afterwards, we all know that a BUBU sleeve is a cut together sleeve with the shoulder. So I'm going to mark 9 inches from the shoulder point, that mark that I just made there. Although I'm going to be using 11 inches for my sleeve, which means I would have to add an extension of 2 inches, and I'll be using my plain fabric for that. So I'm going to mark out 9 inches just like I said earlier. Next, I'm going to mark out 11 inches, which is going to be the placket length for the front, and I'm going to be using the black line at the top of the Ankara piece as my starting line, seeing as I'll be cutting off the white part. Afterwards, I'm going to mark out my waist length, which is 16 inches. I'm going to mark out my hip length measurement, which is 24 inches. Now I'm going to mark out the gown length, and the gown length I'll be working with is 35 inches, but I'm going to add 2 inches allowance, which is going to be 37. From the 2 inches, I'm going to use half an inch to join the shoulders by the time I'm ready to sew, which means the hem allowance would be 1.5 inch. I'm going to proceed to use my roller to roll lines on the marked points. Now I'm going to mark out the wideness of my sleeve, and for that I'll be using 8.5 inches. So you can decide how wide you want it to be. You can even use the 11 inches there. Just do what works for you, but for me I'll be using 8.5 inch. So after I mark that out, I'll proceed to use my ruler to make a line on the marked points. I'm going to draw a line connecting the sleeve length to the sleeve width. I'm going to mark out the back neck measurement, and the neck width is going to be 2.5 inches and the neck depth is going to be 1.5 inch. Now to get the front neckline, on the 11 inches line that I've just pointed, I'm going to go in by 1 inch and draw a straight line connecting it to the neck width. Now I'm going to mark out my round waist measurements divided by 4, and I'll be adding 2 inches allowance, 1 inch seam allowance, and 1 inch for ease. Now on the hip line, I'm going to mark the round hip measurements divided by 4, and I'll be adding 3.5 inch allowance, 1 inch for seam allowance, and 2.5 inch for ease. If you notice from the video and the picture on the thumbnail, the hip point isn't fitted. Alright, that's why I'm adding 2.5 inch allowance, and what I have on the hip line is what I'm going to extend to the hem of the gown. Now I'm going to connect the sleeve to the waist, to the hip, and to the hem. Now I'm going to cut out, and I'm going to cut only the back neckline, so watch closely please. Now I'm going to remove the back piece and then proceed to cut out the front neckline. Now it's time for the pocket, and to do that I'm going to draw a line on the midpoint of the 2 inches, just as you can see. And next I'm going to mark out the waist length in order to draw a line across, just as you can see as well. Now on the horizontal line I'm going to mark 3 inches on both sides, just as I've pointed. And then for the length of the pocket I'm going to be using 5.5 inches, and also make sure it's in a slanted direction. I'll then proceed to use my ruler to draw a line across the marked points, and further use my tape rule to measure what I have on each point in order to ensure that the pockets are placed equally, not that one side is higher and the other side is lower. And for the length, as you could see, I had 5.25 inches on both sides, and for the width on the lower part I have 5 inches. Now that is done, I'm going to be cutting out piece of the plain fabric, which is what I'll be using for the pockets, and it's going to be 10 inches long and 7 inches wide. I've cut out the plain fabric, and as you can see I cut out 2 pieces. Now what I'm going to do is on the width, which is the 7 inches, the shorter part of the fabric, I'm going to mark in 1 inch and draw a straight line across. And from the 1 inch line I'm going to mark ½ inch and draw a line as well. Now on the first line I'm going to divide what we have there and mark out the midpoint. Afterwards I'm going to divide 5.5 into 2 and mark it on both sides. Now that I've marked it out, I'm going to verify to see that I have 5.5. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other piece. Now I'm going to place the plain fabric on the Ankara piece, making sure that the slant line on the Ankara is in the middle of the rectangle that we have on the plain fabric. Okay, and I'll proceed to pin down. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other piece and head over to my machine to sew down the rectangle just as I've pointed, and make sure when you're placing the other piece you place it in the opposite direction. As you can see, I've stitched it down. Now the next thing I'm going to do is open it up, and towards the end on both the up and the down part I'm going to make a triangle notch. Okay, so just watch what I'm doing. I'm going to flip it to the wrong side now. As you can see, I already did one part already. So by the time you flip it to the wrong side, this is what you're going to have. Do not be bothered about it not relaxing. By the time you press it down with your iron, everything will look more nicer and relaxed. Alright, so I'm going to head over to where my iron is, iron it down, and come back to show you what the next step is. After ironing, this is what we have. Now I'm going to fold the plain fabric enough to cover up the space that we have there, and by the time you iron this flat, it will cover up the opening in the front. Alright, so after that, after folding it, I'm going to take the length and the width of what we have on the plain fabric and cut that exact measurement on the Ankara piece. Okay, so as you can see, I've cut out the Ankara piece for the pocket bag. Now before we close that up to form the pocket bag, we're going to stitch down the triangular notch that I just pointed in order to keep the front pocket facing in place. I hope that makes sense. Alright, and afterwards you have to stitch it up and down and then close up the four corners of the pocket just as I pointed. You can see I've stitched the pocket, it's ready. Now the next thing I'm going to do is place the back piece on the front piece, right sides facing each other, and head over to my machine to stitch down the shoulder, and I'm going to stitch it down with 1/2 inch. I'm done stitching, and this is what we have here. Next, I'm going to measure what we have around the neck in order to cut out the plain fabric for the collar. After measuring, I had a total of 32 inches, and I'm going to be adding an extension of 4 inches. So I'm going to cut out the plain fabric of about 36 inches long and 2.5 inches wide on fold, which is 5 inches wide when it's not on fold. I'm cutting out the collar, and this is it. Now I'm going to make a notch on the front neckline on both sides, and on the plain fabric I added tissue stay to it. So you can decide to add and you can decide not to. I just wanted the fabric to be more rigid. So for the stitching, I'm going to place the plain fabric on the neckline just as you can see, and I'm going to stitch it all the way around, starting from the notched point, and we're going to end on the notched point of the other end as well. And when I get there, I'll come back to show you what to do next. As you can see, I've stitched it down. Now what you want to do is make sure the one with the longer extension overlaps the shorter one, just as you can see. I'm going to trim off the excess in order to have the 4 inches length. Okay, and afterwards I'm going to press it down with my iron, folding with 1/2 inch at the bottom, and then fold again in order to get the triangle shape that I want. Okay, so you can decide to not even do the triangle shape. Maybe you just fold it in with 1/2 inch and you have the square looking shape there, and you just stitch down. So here it is, all done, stitched and ironed. Now the next thing to do is to work on the sleeve. I'm going to open this up. Remember I told you earlier that I was going to be adding an extension of 2 inches and I was going to be using the plain fabric, but unfortunately I'm out of plain fabric, so I'm going to be using the Ankara fabric to fill up the remaining 2 inches length. Alright, so I just measured what I have there on the sleeve length, which was 16.5 inches. So I'm going to proceed to cut out 2 pieces of fabric 16.5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide on fold. Now I'm going to explain to you how exactly we're going to stitch this down, okay, because we're going to be turning it in a bias form. So you get the wrong side of the sleeve up and then place the right side of the piece of fabric you're holding on it, stitch down with 1/2 inch, and by the time you iron and you flip it, you have it turned in a bias form, okay, which means the sewing allowance is not going to be seen under. Alright, afterwards you're going to fold in 1/2 inch and top stitch, okay, just as you can see. I'm going to repeat the same process to the other side and come back to show you what next to do. I've done that, and here is the result. Now the next thing I'm going to do is flip this to the wrong side and head over to my machine to close down the side from the sleeve down to the hem with the seam allowance that I left while cutting. Afterwards, I'm going to iron and also fold the hem. You can decide to use your hemming gum to fold it, or you can do the rolled hem, whichever one you choose to do. Okay, so I'm going to do that and you get to see the final results, because this is basically all for the sewing of this dress. Easy breezy, right? And this is the end of today's tutorial. Please, if you found this video helpful, do not forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. If you have any questions, do leave it in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to give answers to your questions. Thank you guys once again. Love you all. Bye.